Rangers fans know one thing. They know that Friday was quite an eventful day for the team as Captain Jacob Trouba was traded to Anaheim. And then the Blue Shirts and Igor Shesterkin, they agreed to an 8-year, $92 million contract extension. So let's talk about these moves and whether they were right for the Rangers or not. We're going to do that with an amazing NHL analyst, the one and only Casey Hudson, who joins me now. Case, what's going on?
Oh, just up here getting ready to figure out where fans are, where their minds are at with all the news that went down Friday and them trying to figure out if they're still going to be in contention for a postseason. So I'm excited. This is where hockey gets better and better before we get to the second half of the season.
Yeah, it really does, because there's still a lot of things to figure out. Who are the pretenders? Who are the contenders? Where do the Rangers stand in all of this? But let's talk about the Rangers first. I'm going to start with Igor Shesterkin. His $92 million contract extension, that is the largest for a goaltender in NHL history. Do you think him signing this contract extension was the right move for the Rangers, considering his performance overall and his value to the team?
Yeah, I think I have to start by saying the amount of people that reached out to me yesterday, like, are you okay with this? And freaking out. I'm like, guys, I never said I didn't want Igor to get paid. He's one of the best goalies in the league and deserves what he deserves. I was just kind of a little trepidatious over a guy becoming the highest paid goalie when, you haven't seen a Stanley Cup final quite yet. But I understand that the New York market values their MVP, the guy that keeps them in any sort of game and postseason run. So in terms of, is this the right move? If you asked me this a couple of weeks ago, I probably would have still said this is way too high. I still think it is pretty high considering, but I started hearing some rumblings that because of the performance, because of the chaos going on in the organization for the Rangers, that price was starting to lift from that 11.5 that broke a couple months ago to 12, potentially even 13. So it is the right move considering they were able to keep him at 11.5. Also, it came out few hours ago, moments ago, no move clause. So now he is a New York Ranger. He is staying put. He wants to be here in equivalence to how much the fan base wants him here. And then something else that came out moments ago was the fact that he's probably going to pace the pay in terms of how much he gets up front, or not up front, but over the course of the next few years, which can almost be an equivalent to the movement of Trouba's contract. So with them alleviating cap space now and signing him in this moment, I am okay with the fact that you're using the cap space that you just freed up rather than trying to do this whole future cap space thing, because that was the argument everybody had against me when I was like, it's a bit high and a lot of teams still have to be bailed out of bad positions and you still need to build a team in front of this guy. So it's the right move in the fact that they didn't have to go up to 13 million. They got the no trade clause or the no movement clause. He wants to be here in equal measure. He's now going to feel valued. For market, for morale, which I'm sure we'll get into, it was necessary because things are imploding, and keeping this guy, keeping Shesterkin, keeping, the cornerstone, as you and I discussed, of a franchise, like that's a morale move, and it's going to be somewhat of a win for this team.
Okay, so you like the move. I'm glad that people checked in on you, as they should
Timing.
have. I'm glad that
I'll
they
say
did.
timing of the move.
The timing of the move, right? But with
I
any
know.
move,
Yeah.
right, Case, there are potential benefits and there are potential risks, especially when it comes to committing such a large portion of the salary cap to Shesterkin. How does this decision align with the Rangers' long-term goals here as they move forward?
Yeah, risk versus reward, right? So in terms of where this benefits them, I kind of just touched on that. The morale, the fan base, the marketing nature of all of this, that's going to try to bring some stabilization to the New York Rangers fan base in the market. More importantly, it's showing that you believe in a guy who has to weather a lot of storms, regardless of his performance as of late, because slumps happen. He had one last year. He might have been going one through right now, but he does face a lot of turbulence in terms of high danger shots and the defense or the team as a whole not playing very well in front of him. In terms of the risk here with locking up that money, what's the Rangers' plan in terms of building in front of Igor Shesterkin? That's still a large question mark. And to have a question mark that big for a team that came into this season saying this is a win now season, this is a win now team, it still makes you kind of hesitant. Now, over the past couple of weeks, a lot of questions have been raised over the New York Rangers core. Well, if you have to start revamping a core, that costs money. And if the cap is only going to increase by 5%, if it doesn't make the jump that you and I have talked about, Dexter, beyond 5%, you still have to work within your means and get a supporting cast to alleviate this goaltender. And I still have some nerves because if they're not playing well in front of Shesterkin, if you're not preserving your top goaltender, who, yeah, they have to be able to come up and make big saves on a nightly basis, we are going into a bit of a different off season or season break here. We don't have an all-star week. We have 2 weeks to have four nations take place. You have players that are going to be coming off of rosters, potentially showing fatigue when they come back. So a team that's already not performing well in front of Shesterkin potentially might come back from the Four Nations break and not play well in front of him, preparing for a potential postseason run. So it raises a number of concerns in terms of building out either around this core to protect Shesterkin or going for the full rebuild and kind of imploding some things a little further.
And that is the question going forward here, Case, because now you have Shesterkin. He's locked in as the franchise cornerstone. Do you see the Rangers building their entire system around his elite goaltending, which we have seen, similar to teams like the Devils we saw in the past with Martin Brodeur? Do you see the Rangers doing something like that in terms of how they look at building this team going forward?
I think they have to. I think they absolutely have to, because Shesterkin just got that money. He just got paid because of how much he has saved this team and bailed them out and dealt with so many different obstacles in terms of making sure that this team stays in it. Now, that's not to take away from the talent on the roster. It's there. But the mistakes, the miscues, the lack of buy-in that it feels like is the vibe right now. Yeah, you've got to build around that in front of a guy that you need to kind of make sure that you're managing better. They have a great backup in Quick, so that helps also. But there's only so many games that a top-notch goalie can weather that many storms and not find himself in slumps like we just saw him in, or a slump that he was in last year. And not to make it a comparison of teams, but I say this because Andre Vasilevsky, a tremendous goaltender. And the minute that some movement in front of him defensively started to kind of fall behind, we saw that change the nature of his play. So relying on your goaltender alone, that's not a recipe for a Stanley Cup or a deep postseason run. And the Metro is problematic. The Capitals are much better than everybody thought. And now you have a New Jersey Devils. They're fast, they're living up to the hype in a number of ways, and they're on the right trajectory to kind of continue excelling in the second half of the season, God willing. So they have to build a team in front of Igor that's going to benefit Igor Shesterkin so that 8 years can really matter for the New York Rangers.
Yep, it'll be interesting to see how they build that team in front of him. I want to move off of Shesterkin for 1 second and talk about Jacob Trouba and his tenure as captain. He was obviously traded to Anaheim on Friday, and the tenure has been described as divisive, and his trade to Anaheim has been called a messy breakup. How do you think his departure will impact the Rangers' locker room dynamic and defensive structure as they move forward?
I think it's going to take a moment. Moving your captain is never a light feat, for one. We saw when, Horvat left Vancouver. I just experienced that in my transition up to New York, leaving Tampa Bay. As many people know, I cover the Lightning on the ground for 6-7 seasons, and it changes the morale of the locker room. And then it takes a minute to say who's going to be your voice in the locker room and how does that voice translate across, because even though Tampa Bay had Steven Stamkos, Pat Maroon was also a large voice that assisted and bolstered Steven Stamkos' voice. So when Pat Maroon left, the team felt that. And then Steven Stamkos, the team felt that. And it takes a minute. So who that next voice is going to be, I think, is an adjustment period. And that voice is the one that you lean on when you're in tough games or when you're down 2 goals. And so I'm hearing a lot of people and fans mentioning that Trocheck just makes sense. There's other fans that say, let's just go ahead and start investing in the younger generation of the team. But everybody sees Trouba and they think about a lot of the mess and the penalties and kind of the messy plays and stuff. But if there is one thing to remember Trouba by, it is his community action. I mean, there's so many people I've talked to about Trouba, and it's just like his impact in the community, his hands-on approach to making sure people felt like they mattered and stuff. You can't replace that. So I feel like it's going to shake things up for a minute, because it's also a weird feeling for your captain to exit the locker room. And when you do find out you're the next guy, you don't really know how to fit the shoes of what was just there without feeling like you're trying to replace something that mattered to you, because he inspired every guy in that locker room. So it's a weird fit. And I think in this time of the season, it's very weird too, but a lot of things can happen now and kind of shake off once the new year gets here. I mean, we saw a very messy Oilers team last year that ended up going to the Stanley Cup final. And I look at something like that and say, New York Rangers are not dead, but they have to come to a lot of conclusions like now.
Yeah, the time is now, and it is not easy to move on from your captain in the middle of the season, and we'll see who becomes the new voice in that Rangers locker room. Now, Chris Drury made two massive moves in one day, as we've talked about. How would you grade his strategy and decision making thus far? And do these moves put the Rangers in a better position now, or does it signal a longer term rebuild or retooling, Casey?
Ooh, the grade on this is tough for me because I feel like, from a PR perspective, your girl went to school for public relations for a minute. I think it was like, let's get this dumpster fire breakup out of the way. And then, oh, by the way, let's have the good news of Igor Shesterkin. And I think it also overshadowed the magnitude of the breakup with Trouba, which they tried to quiet, something that was known to be messy since this summer. But it also overshadowed like fans getting what they want and keeping Igor Shesterkin. Like, usually that kind of stuff happens and the press conferences happen and everything is, around this elated signing. And I feel like it was kind of a mismatch in terms of, let's do bad news, good news. Because both of these players are high staples to this team. And I mean staple in terms of Trouba being the captain, and I mean staple in terms of what Igor means to the Rangers. But doing it in the same day, I think, was just like a bit of a messy catalyst, in my personal opinion. Now, where it isn't a terrible move is, like I mentioned, you open up the cap space that you're working within, and then you make the big deal with Igor Shesterkin, and you're working within your means rather than looking ahead and being like, oh, we're going to get the cap space down the line without having a plan for what you're going to do with your core or how you're going to build in front of Igor. So I feel like that was a smart move with the timing. But again, like, having Trouba be dismissed and moved, and knowing all the drama that transpired over the summer, and then him being so candid in interviews after that news came out and stuff, and then putting Igor Shesterkin out there, I just feel like there was a lot of overshadowing, and it still just looked very messy.
Yeah, no, I could see it with the look there, and I could see why they thought maybe it would be a good PR spin to have some good news at the back end of this, but it does one just take away from the other or affects the other, as you said there. That is Casey Hudson, great NHL analyst. Nobody out there knows the game better than her, in my opinion. Case, I appreciate you coming here to break this down. Stay warm, stay well. We'll talk soon.
I'll sure try. I'll talk to you soon.